Hello and welcome. I am Matt Roddy, and this is the Greater Prescott podcast, where we talk about, you guessed it, all things Greater Prescott. Today, my guest is Greg Picard. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
This show, you are my first guest to go a little bit different. So I shared with you before we started, I've done all business owners so far. And as I've been thinking through Greater Prescott as a whole, it's really coming to my attention that we have a demographic your age that has stories for years. And so I want to start having more people on the show that just get to share their life. And so you and I struck up a conversation when I was hanging door flyers, and I thought this guy would be a great story for me, not only to learn about, but also for everyone else. So that's why I'm really looking forward to having you on the show, is just to share your story, because I think they're enjoyable, and I also think other people will find them unique, enjoyable, and it's interesting that you also have some other stuff going on. So we will also get into things that you do now, even though you're quote retired. I don't know that I'd call that
No such thing.
no such thing. And the elephant in the room is the train set behind us. Give people just the real quick, what are they looking at?
They're looking at a model railroad HO scale that has been basically moved 16 different times.
Okay.
It's been twice the size, and then it's been down to a bookshelf and all things in between.
Yeah.
Rehabilitated at this point and operational.
Okay. All right. We'll probably have you talk a little bit more about it at some point when we come across it. So let's kick things off. Just let the people know, where were you born and raised? What'd you do when you were a kid? And just start to give us a sense of your story.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
Like so many people in Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
And normal childhood
Yeah.
after World War II. Went to school there and played in the riverbed behind my house.
Okay.
It was a much more rural environment.
Gotcha.
in the San Fernando Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that where they grow a lot of things are grown? San Fernando? Oh no, that's out a little east of.
yeah, there was
the
quite
city.
a bit of agriculture in the San Fernando Valley
Okay.
before all of the settlement. In fact, a lot of people don't know that Los
Gotcha.
Angeles was one of the most productive agricultural counties in the United States at one point.
Before the grow. Weather?
Yeah,
A
weather had
combination
a
of
lot to do
things?
with it.
Okay. Interesting. Oh, was the riverbed dry?
Seasonally.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it was bank to bank 30 feet across, and other times it was a trickle, and other times it was gone altogether.
Okay. All right. So, what'd you do when you were a kid? Besides playing in a riverbed, of course.
I was a lot of outdoor odds and ends.
Yeah.
We'd play softball in the street,
Yep.
hide and seek, all of that stuff when I was little. Was pretty involved in school. I'd say you're more active classroom
On the academic
guy,
side? Okay.
Yeah, than anything else.
Yeah.
I got involved with playing the guitar when I was 10 years old.
Nice.
And started and kept it up, my whole life.
Yep.
And that was a huge part of my life, has always been.
Music in general.
Yeah,
okay.
music.
All right.
Yep.
Who got you started?
In terms of music?
Yeah, family member, friend.
my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, she just, for some reason, she'd see me oogle Rick Nelson on the Ozzie and Harriet show, and she knew I liked to sing, and she
Yeah.
thought, oh, well, how about you take guitar lessons?
Okay.
And it grew from there.
Yeah. I had to take, I did a little bit of piano,
Me
and
too.
then I decided to take trumpet in 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And about a month in, I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
They made me take it the whole year, but I wonder actually if I would have picked up a guitar. There's just something about a guitar I feel like might have drawn me in a little more.
Well, it's a more comprehensive instrument to
Okay.
be able to play and accompany yourself if you want to sing more easily and more quickly learned than piano. I had to take piano. I was a music minor in college too,
Okay.
and it was never my favorite instrument.
Okay. This is what you had to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
All right. So played guitar, no sports, mostly.
No.
Yeah. Well, played outside.
Yeah.
All right. So then, did you go to college?
I did.
All
I
right.
went to college in Southern California.
Okay.
And like most students, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I was roughly going to college to become a teacher.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be a science teacher in my first couple of years in college.
Okay.
I took all the science classes, and then I realized I like science, but not that much. And so I switched and became an English major with a music minor.
Yeah.
And loved it and went all the way through. And then when I got through college, that part of college, I got very interested in the idea of being a counselor.
Okay.
And so I actually got my master's in secondary teaching and also in counseling.
No kidding. What was the impetus for that?
Just some of the people I met and people in need of help.
Of help, yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. I like that aspect of being helpful.
So this is going to be an overarching theme. I think you really like to help people. Like as we kind of get into some stuff and what you did for a career, you help people.
Yeah.
And you shared before the podcast that you still like being around people, and I think part of that is just like helping people.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you said you did get a master's. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So then,
I used it for a few years. I happened to move to Oregon, and I worked as a counselor with the Employment Service.
Okay.
And I helped people get jobs, and that was a different experience. It was fun, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And the odd thing about it was that when I had left college, the day that I checked out with my sheepskin, I happened to walk past a bulletin board that had a flyer on it for Be a Park Ranger.
Okay.
And I looked at that, and after all of these years of college, doing all of these things in preparation for some very specific kinds of jobs, I looked at that and I said, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to have been. And it took me years to figure out that riverbed I played in, that had to have been formative in who I was.
Yes.
It just had to be. And all the mountains and trails and stuff that I did growing up as a teenager. So I did go to work as a counselor in Oregon, and then the whole time I went back and studied and, got more classes in outdoor type things and science again and law enforcement, and then went back and took the test for being a park ranger and got the job.
Okay. And that was just a couple years after you had finished your master's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It took me a little longer than a couple of years to get back and get into the job as a ranger, though. But
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. You kind of can look back and go, because I played outside all the time, and so putting me at a desk job, it's not the best fit. So you just start to see those little things along the way, and they help pave the way.
Yep.
So, what year did you become a park ranger?
1974.
Okay.
Yeah, went through the police.
I was born in 1983.
Yeah, I went through the police academy in 1974, and then started work as a law enforcement ranger.
Now, do you have to do? So I know nothing about that. Do you have to become, in a sense, go through the law enforcement training before you can be a park ranger? Is that just part of? Are they part and parcel?
It depends.
How does that work?
It depends on the agency you work with, the state you're in, and how they've developed their park service.
Okay.
The National Park Service and the state of California both have people who are designated as rangers as peace officers. They are state police officers.
Okay.
And so they take care of, in my career time at least, a broad base of activities, whether it's giving a campfire program and a nature hike, or arresting a murderer, or chasing after a drunk, or whatever it takes to manage the park. Because we were all the law that there was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's back up just a hair. So 1974 is when you got the stamp of approval to
go to work for the Park Service.
Go to work for the Park Service. Where were you, and what does the job trajectory look like? I mean, what were you? What am I trying to get at? Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah.
Well, I'll back up just a little bit. Prior to 1974, I had been doing some weekend park ranger and forest ranger work with the National Forest Service and the U.S. Park Service when I was living in Oregon. Yeah, I'd get through my counseling stuff, and then I'd go work for a couple of days part-time and then come back. but when California finally picked me up for the State Department of Parks and Recreation, then I began and I started work at Humboldt Redwood State Park in northwestern California.
Okay. All right. Okay. You say you kind of are in the middle of nowhere, but I think that's hard for probably a lot of us to grasp because we mostly live in a town of some sort.
Yeah.
So you spent much of your career in these parks.
Oh yeah,
separated
town,
from.
Yeah, town would usually be an hour away.
Okay.
In most of my assignments. And,
okay.
And you'd live in places where you'd buy groceries for 2 weeks worth of time, and
okay.
Be prepared. Roads would go out.
Yeah.
All sorts of things would happen, and so you needed to be backed up and prepared.
Yeah. What the law enforcement piece of being a park ranger is really interesting to me. It makes sense. Was that something that you were fine to, in a sense, learn how to do and to actually then end up doing, versus when I hear park ranger, I think of just the person who's doing those campfire, those fireside chats and the educational things.
Right.
Those are very different. So I'm just curious what it was.
I loved the generalist role of a ranger because it gave me all sorts of things to do. And I was really anxious to learn all those things and try and do them as well as possible. But you're right in saying that there's a large number of people who are not going to be able to do that or want to do that. And typically most of the departments that have instituted this generalist concept have over the years have moved more to specializing, and the National Park Service has done it. And the State Department of Parks and Recreation in California has also done it in the same way. And so the rangers are still there. They still can do the things that I did, but they now have hired interpreters and historians and resource ecologists. And they take the burden of some of those peripheral duties that were all part of my job when I was doing it.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh. Man, you never did, like, your every day was almost had to have been basically different. I mean, in that sense.
Yeah, you never knew you know, whether you were going to be sitting talking to a senator one day or whether you were going to be picking up litter on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And truly there was.
So tell people about, why would you talk to a senator? You're just a park ranger, Greg.
Yeah, we'd have difficulties at times. We would want to do things or not do things. I remember one park, I won't mention the name, but a particular park where there was a foot race that was held. It was a long foot race, and it had 2,000 people running. And the goal was to get from point A to point B and win the race. The idea in our minds was you would stay on a trail to do that.
Oh, yes.
The runners didn't want to do that. And they were literally creating trails everywhere, creating erosion problems, and everything was willy-nilly. It was a very popular event, very politically popular event, and I was, at that time, acting superintendent of a whole bunch of parks in that area, and I was saying, no, you can't do that. You got to stay on the trail. And I got crosswise with high-ranking politicians and had to sit and talk with them. Other times we'd talk with them because we were interested in getting budgets passed, and we wanted somebody who would fight for it and understood, what the issue was. And so there were opportunities. It wasn't a big part of the job, but it did happen.
Talk about a generalist. And then you're picking up litter on the way home from talking to like a senator.
Or cleaning an outhouse.
I bet you did that a few times.
Sometimes it had to be done, and you didn't wait for somebody else on staff to do it. So
good. That's what I want to teach my kids. Like, let's just talk. I want my kids to see a need and take care of it.
Well, and one of the things that I think probably conceptualizes all of the rangers, or most all of them that I worked with, was we looked at the parks that we were assigned to as our homes. And people were guests. Which they
literally were.
And people were guests in our home. And so we wanted to do things that made everything right. And I'd say most of us were that way. It was a good bunch.
It makes sense. You started at, what was the park's name that you...
Humboldt Redwoods. It's the place where the coastal redwood giants are, sempervirens.
So you had to start at one of the most awful parks ever, right? This is like one of the most most amazing parks.
Yeah, it was unbelievable how beautiful it was. And it was a pretty nice, calm place. We didn't have a lot of crime or a lot of problems typically.
Yeah.
It was a good learning environment. My first learning experience, my training officer was having a lot of fun. And so he said on his day off, he's walking around with a radio. On his day off, he comes across a little problem down on the river and waves me down, calls me on the radio and waves me down and says, I need you to go take care of something. And he's snickering. Yeah. And he said, yeah, I got a bunch of skinny dippers down there on the river. And skinny dipping was a violation. And it was something that we didn't want in public areas of the park. Yeah. And so I had to go down and deal with that. And I have to tell you, it's challenging for a young man, embarrassing for a young man to go and talk to a bunch of naked people and tell them, you got to put your clothes on. And they can be sometimes pretty volatile when you suggest that to them.
That's one reason I want people across the table sharing stories. Like, you just, these things are, you can dream some of these things up, man.
Yeah. I was embarrassed. It was hard.
Yeah. All right. So walk us through, I mean, you eventually became a supervisor, but I don't know how long that took. Where all did you work? What parks for how long? I assume different parks have maybe slightly different duties, maybe mostly because each park is just a little different in the people that it draws and the activities.
Right. There's a lot of variation.
What's park ranger life like?
Yeah. Depends on where you live too. Okay. I mean, if you're a resident ranger, like I was in the North Coast, my next assignment was a place called Grizzly Creek State Park, and it's a little park in the middle, really seriously in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
And you work 24 hours a day.
Okay.
The park's phone is your resident's phone.
Yeah.
You get calls all the time.
Yeah.
When the sheriff can't respond to a problem because he's 20 miles away responding to another one, the sheriff's department calls you and tells you they need you to go out and deal with something outside the park. Mm-hmm. So that particular assignment was very, very different. You had to be on top of everything.
And you're
all
fairly
the time.
Isolated, and
there were two of us out there.
I was saying you're the man almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My next assignment was completely different. I was a boat patrol ranger on Lake Oroville.
All right.
The one that the dam blew out recently in the news. Yeah, that was an interesting place to work, and much more different, much more high-level enforcement, more problems.
Okay.
And working on the water all day, which is something I never had done. In fact, you had to go and had to be able to swim underwater all the way across the Olympic-sized swimming pool. You had to be able to tread water for 15 minutes. You had to do all sorts of things before they
you have a little athlete in you, apparently, Greg.
enough to barely survive. Yeah, I managed to qualify.
Gotcha. Yeah, because obviously the lake is going to bring in people who are camping and boating. And
it's a big lake, too. It's 167 miles of
Holy
shoreline.
Holy cow. So that's huge.
Yeah. Big old feather falls comes down at the top in the very end.
Did you spend a lot of time in a boat, or was that someone else's job?
No, I was in a boat.
Okay.
Most of the time I was there.
Wow.
I did do land patrol for a while, but I was mostly in a boat. One of my best experiences, too, while I was doing that, one cold morning, you get used to watching the shoreline as you go, and you notice if the shoreline looks different, it's time to investigate. Is something going on there? Is there a person doing something? Whatever. Mm-hmm. So you're very tuned into the shoreline. And I'm roaring up the middle fork, and suddenly I see this odd-looking bump on the shore that I hadn't seen before. And I thought, well, I'll go over and investigate it. There's not too many on the water today, and so I got time. And I get closer, and soon I realize it's a giant golden eagle just standing right next to the water on the shore. So I get, I don't know, probably 50 yards out, and I've got momentum, so I cut my engine, and I just coast slowly in. And it's amazing that I worked it as well as I did. I didn't crash into anything, and I didn't stop short. I came in, and the bow of the boat is as close as you and I are together, and I just sat there and I watched that eagle for probably 15 minutes.
Good. I say as long as you can.
Yeah. Wow. And then started up and left, and it was just I saw so many things. I mean, mountain lions, eagles, bears, all on that particular water assignment. So
that is so neat.
It.
Yeah.
After Oroville, I went to, where was it? Oh, the desert. Big change. No water.
Yeah.
And I worked in half a dozen different parks down in that desert area.
What parks?
Well, Red Rock Canyon.
Okay.
Mostly a park that sits next to a very active off-road vehicle area that the Bureau of Land Management ran.
Okay.
So we had a beautiful, beautiful rocky environment there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the folks would motor up and roar up and down the hills outside of the park.
Okay.
And so we dealt with more of the peripheral things that went wrong because the BLM rangers there was one of them for 1 million acres. And so every time somebody broke a leg or smashed their head or whatever, we were the ones that wound up responding to it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of medical there. In fact, I think that's why I got the job, because I was an EMT.
Gotcha. Yeah, actually, because we haven't touched on that, did you become an EMT in training or at some point along the way?
My first year out of training, I happened to run into a guy in the ambulance service who said he was running an EMT class at the college, and so I went and took that class from him.
You were just learning. You were soaking things up.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And so I worked with him. I worked with his ambulance service.
Okay.
And then I also, did whatever came my way in the park, and I've dealt with everything from heart attacks to splinters in your hand. So
man, talk about a generalist.
I loved it. I just there's no way to get bored.
No, I love it. I would classify myself as more of a generalist as well, and that just is more of interest to me. So you spend some time at the Red Rock Park. And how do assignments work? Do you clock in for a couple years where you just, in a sense, know you're going to be there?
It changed while I was in the department. It used to be that they would move you mandatorily every 2 or 3 years. They didn't want somebody to hog all of the beautiful parks because we had some that were not considered gems by any means. And so the only way that you could stay somewhere, well, you really couldn't. But what happened was that the department realized it was costing them thousands and thousands of dollars that they didn't have for a fairly poorly funded department in the state, and so they decided, okay, you're gonna stay wherever you're assigned after your training. Okay. And if you want to go somewhere else, you either have to promote, and we'll pay for your move, or you have to pay for your own move.
Yes.
And that just put an end to it.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have nearly as much moving around. Now, I fortunately was able to promote a number of times, and so I got a lot of different assignments.
Okay.
So my next assignment after Red Rock, I went to, where was it? There's so many of them, it's hard to keep track. I went to Marshall Gold Discovery, which is where gold was discovered in California at Sutter's Mill.
All right.
Worked there for a year. Beautiful little historic park on the river.
Okay.
And it had, mostly historical references. There wasn't a lot of recreational activity.
Yeah.
And then from there, I only spent a year there, and I went to the Marin District, which is the North Bay of San Francisco.
Okay.
Very, very active. Had several different parks, Mount Tam, Angel Island, places like that. And lots and lots of activity. Okay. Several murders, several different kinds of things that would happen. Yeah. Community activities that went on that were difficult to manage. Yes. Big gatherings. We had a mountain theater that held 5,000 people in it, and we had actively had plays up there in the mountain theater all the time. And then we had a lot of foot races and other things. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Interesting.
But it was a great assignment there as chief ranger, and at the end of that, my boss promoted out, and they made me the acting district superintendent there over all of those 6 parks. And so I got a lot of good experience doing that for a while. Yeah. And moved on from there.
Real quick, what does that job entail?
District superintendent is more of a office manager kind of a position. Okay. You're in the office most of the time. And again, when you're managing a half a dozen state parks through a large area, there's just a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
Budgeting and managing personnel and
that's
things
why
like
I
that.
ask.
Yeah. It's not a particularly fun job if you like to be out and active and doing things. So it was a challenge.
Yeah.
I took a lateral from that training assignment down to the Marin District, which is in San Diego County.
All right.
It involves Cuyamaca and Mount Palomar. You may have heard of Mount Palomar because just adjacent to the park, there's a big observatory there.
Okay, it rings a bell.
Yeah. And so I worked at those two parks, and that one was a very different experience. We had a number of mountain lion attacks.
Oh, no.
While we were there. We had one that one that bit a little girl, and then another one that killed a woman and fed on her, and then several others that were chases that were thwarted by a very big dad who didn't want his kid to get carried off and things like that. So we wound up having to go out and actually hunt and kill mountain lions.
Okay.
Which is not what, as park rangers, we really were
I
about.
would imagine.
So it was very challenging emotionally, but it was something that we saw that needed to be done.
Okay.
We took a lot of political heat for it, but in the end, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
From there, I went to Mendocino.
Okay.
And lived on the edge of the coastal bluffs and ran 26 different parks up and down the coast of California. And that
was our coastal bluffs a rough place to live?
Terrible. So terrible.
Okay, that's I was just making sure I'm catching your sarcasm. All right.
Yeah. And that was.
Is that central?
It's the northern. Just about if you go 200 miles north of San Francisco, 150 miles north of San
up
Francisco.
there. Okay.
That coastal area.
All right.
And so dealing with issues more related to ocean activities and to bluff activities and things like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting how each area you were in had such different activity, as you say.
Different environments.
Yeah, and again, you switch things up.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and each one gives you a different perspective on life. I mean, people
talk to that.
People would get killed riding their dune buggies. Then you go to the north coast in Mendocino, and you have somebody get taken by a shark who's out diving. I mean, there's just all sorts of different experiences. Dope addicts and dope sales in some parks that are terrible. We had an undercover operation in our own staff that I had to run, and each one gives you a different perspective on life.
Absolutely. Man, that's why I want people like you across the table. One of the things that fascinates me in life are the various jobs that people have. When I hear of someone saying, I did XYZ, and I'm going, I didn't even know that was a job. And just to hear about some of these things that you do, it's fascinating.
Well, the variety, I think, is what kept me interested in the whole thing.
Yeah. So after Mendocino,
I retired.
Okay.
See, Mendocino put me in an office all the time, and it's like,
gotcha.
I'm done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Even on the bluffs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had time. I had all my time in. I had 30 years. So.
You had 30 years. So we just went down 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was not about to get bored, and so I went to work when I moved to Durango, Colorado in retirement. And I went to work for the fire department there.
Okay.
And worked as a medic and a firefighter.
Well, that would have put you around, your mid-50s? Mid to late 50s?
I was 57 at the time.
And this is actually another thing that fascinates me. If you start when you're 18 or 21 and put in 25 or 30 years as a police officer, as a law enforcement person, as a firefighter, I've met so many people around here, and the guy goes, I'm retired. And I'm like, You're a baby.
Yeah.
Well, I was 30 years for whatever.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. So it's
good.
It has its challenges, but it was
of course
a good opportunity that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So then why Durango?
I liked the mountains. I had vacationed there a lot. I was fascinated with the Native American history there. And the cliff dwellings and all of that.
Okay.
And I just liked the environment in general. And I had ridden the narrow gauge train there. And of course, as you see, I'm a train aficionado.
Yeah, what would you call yourself? Aficionado, okay.
And so I went to work part-time for the Durango and Silverton Railroad while I was there.
Okay.
And did a brakeman job on the train for a while, and then I worked in their museum, helped build their model railroad there, and did historical interpretation as a museum worker there.
Yeah. And again, full-time, you were working full-time? Or
all of my jobs were part-time there. I was part-time with the fire department and part-time with the...
Gotcha. What a nice mix. You can do your medic stuff, and you can do some fun, unique trains. Again, the variety just keeps going and going.
No boredom.
Yeah. Were you, well, tell us about now, since we've spoke about trains, were you into trains long, I assume a while before that? How does that all work out? And how do we end up sitting here in your garage in good old Prescott, Arizona with this behind us?
I got my first train set when I was 10.
All right.
And it was a good Christmas.
Yeah.
And I started building and enjoying the concept of, I can do all this myself. I can make these mountains. I can make these rivers.
Yes.
I can make the train go where I want. And so I had a little 4x8 layout on a piece of plywood. And it grew, and then it shrank, and then it grew, and then it shrank. And then this one was completely filling a 30x30 basement.
Okay.
Before I moved here, I had to throw 2/3 of it away.
Yeah.
And I've been piecing it together in places that didn't go together.
Okay.
Ever since I got here.
Gotcha.
And finally kind of have it back together. And
this is just a small 2-car garage. It's it's no 30x30.
No, but it's got the better pieces from the previous layouts, and so that was the part I wanted to save.
How would you describe some of your favorite pieces? Are they, does one remind you of Mendocino and one things like that?
The desert rocks.
Oh yeah, okay.
Remind me of my time in the desert.
Yeah.
Though we didn't have cliff dwellings, but we did have a lot of rocks that are red and like that.
I have a fun idea. So I'm just going to go behind the camera. I'm just going to turn it over here, and you can just kind of walk us through. I'll give people a little better sense. You'll have to stay here, but you can turn. Okay. Or, frankly, you can take out your mic. Just do that. Let's have fun.
We'll do that.
I've never done that. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily need to wear the headphones if they don't work.
Okay.
Just pop it up. No. It's just, there you go.
Well, if you start on this end, if you start on this end, this it kind of reminds me of the harbor in Mendocino, down in Noyo Harbor up in Fort Bragg. And so I just have places that are kind of there to remind me of things.
All right.
The town is just sort of a mix of probably a lot of different places that I've lived, different kinds of buildings that represent different places. The rich folks living up on the hill in the more Victorian houses, obviously. And then every town has to have a trailer park. And then over here, some gold panning and some Marshall gold kind of a feel with the river coming down. Then we get into the desert scene, and we move into something that's vaguely reminiscent of Red Rock Canyon, but also of the Anasazi ruins that I was so fond of in Durango. Yeah. And so that's really my favorite part of the layout, building that whole thing. Then more natural farmland and areas like that. Ski areas like we had in Durango, Colorado, coming down, gondola rides, and then a campground, which is a lot like that campground at Grizzly Creek that I started out running all by myself. I loved it. And then a lumber company that was down and around the area of Grizzly Creek, and then more woodland area with fire lookout towers and other things that I've had to deal with in my career as well. So that's kind of a quick rundown on it.
Good job. I'll click this back in for you.
You're much more talented at it.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I've never, I think it just hit me because I've never understood the appeal to something like this. But one of the things that just struck me was how much you can make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just went through a lot of your life right here.
Yeah,
and that's
your own
really
world.
unique.
Yeah.
I really like that. Yeah. Man, are you done with it? Is it a sort of thing that is, in fact, never...
I think modeling is never done, but I think I'm pretty close.
Slowing down, at least. Okay.
Yeah, more of it, especially when you get as complicated with all of the lighting and sound modules and everything else, there's a lot of constant maintenance that goes on.
Okay.
And so that keeps me enough busy.
Okay. So, Durango, then...
Well, I moved here because, number one, I got tired of shoveling 8 feet of snow every winter.
Yeah.
And this was a little bit better. I like the pine forest. It's the kind of place that I've always tended to live over the years.
Okay.
But not as much snow to deal with here. If we get 3 feet, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I can handle it. There it was just, you'd get rid of the snow and then the wind would blow it all back and you'd just be shoveling constantly.
Yeah.
So, and I also wanted to be a little closer to my daughter who lives in California.
Okay.
And I write books with her. And so that makes it a little bit easier to go and meet with her and talk when we have to.
Yeah, so let's dive in. So Greg's retired, but Greg is an avid... you write books, you've got music. So let's dive in. Let's start telling people about this. I
remember one day when I was working in the Park Service and I had gotten the flu and I hated it. I'm laying on the couch and I'm thinking, what do I want to do with my life? And I said, someday I want to write a book.
Okay.
And that idea just kept, fermenting over the years. And I did spend some time while I was with the Park Service doing a lot of writing of one type or another. And I did start a book during that process, but I never seemed to be able to maintain the time and consistency to actually finish it.
Mostly just an outlet, in a sense?
I did a lot of short stories and a lot of articles in magazines and newspapers and things like that, but no real long work.
All right.
And so when I retired, my daughter turned to me and called and said, Dad, we should write a book together.
All right.
And I said, okay, why not? Maybe we can keep each other motivated and keep it going. So she and I decided that we would write what we knew. And what we knew was a park ranger raising his daughter in the middle of nowhere by himself and getting into murder and mischief.
Okay.
And so that brought about Keepers of the Sandbox, which is set in the deserts of Southern California.
All right.
And then brought back Old Bones, which is in the park in Southern California, Cuyamaca and Palomar that I worked at.
Okay.
A lot like this environment here with pine trees and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then at the completion of that, she is so busy teaching school that it's real hard to write together. So I started writing a series about an arson investigator who works in Durango, Colorado.
Okay.
And I've got 3 books about that. This one is pretty heavily into the wildfire side of things.
All right.
The department I worked for in Durango did a lot of the wildland firefighting as well as the structural city firefighting.
Yeah.
So I got some time in that. But I like writing what I know. And what I know is these kinds of things. They're fictional mystery type books, but it's nice to be able to bring the background and be able to write it that way. So I have fun doing that, and I got 2 more books in the arson investigator series that are done, and I'm working on a couple of other books. I'm also working on a historical fiction book set in the early 1900s.
Okay.
It is amazing the seminal kinds of things that happened between 1910 and 1940. And so I'm exploring that using my mom as sort of a framework for the storyline.
Yeah. Is your mother still alive? Oh, okay.
No. I wish she were, because I think she'd get a kick out of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway. And then music's been a part of my life since I was 10, as we talked about before, and I've done several albums. like to do country and blues, and I like to do gospel.
Okay.
And so these are some that reflect that. These are also some pop type numbers from a variety of genres and a variety of years, mostly love song type things. And then again, that's a Christian worship one. And then this one's mostly country and mostly original songs that I've written.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I do now, is either music or writing.
Yeah.
And keeping myself busy that way.
Good. Because what would you be doing if you weren't keeping yourself busy?
You know, I don't know how COVID would work, for instance. If I didn't have all of this stuff, I would probably be kind of at my wit's end for what do I do? Yeah.
I think since being in Prescott, meeting people like you, it really sheds light on how important it is to keep doing.
Yeah, to have a plan, especially for retirement.
Especially for retirement. That's actually lately been... So I have a master's in psychology. And this just really lately has kind of triggered something in my brain going, how can we get more people active, especially in your demographic? Frankly, we can all get more active.
Yeah.
I'm as much included.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I see people like you who you're doing stuff, I think it's really important.
Yeah. And physical activity is important. And this is a community that's a great place for physical activity. I mean, in terms of trails and in terms of groups that you can do things with, and seniors groups that will do things that are physically active. Yeah. I really kind of fortunate in terms of the department that I worked for, both the fire department and the Park Service required physical fitness.
Okay.
And so you had to perform. You had to go in and you had to run these 3-mile runs, and you had to be able to do this and that and the other. So it became a lifelong habit. And so I can carry that out here and go on hiking trails, and I can run in the neighborhood or on my treadmill and stay active. And that's a real important thing to do the older you get.
Oh man, I know. Good. What else have we not covered? You are a man of many trades, and it's so fun to learn about.
Yeah.
People like you, Greg.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't think of myself as anything interesting, but I'm glad that you found the opportunity.
We all have our story, and they're all interesting in some form or fashion.
Well,
that's just how it goes.
Thank you so much.
Let people know how they can find out more about you, where they can find books, music, and all the good stuff.
Well, the easiest way is all of these, the music and the books, are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And just, type in my name and you'll see all of the Captain Picards from Star Trek, but eventually you'll come across my name and you'll see the books that I have.
Okay.
Or enter them by title, and that maybe should shortcut it, or title and my name.
Okay.
They're available in the Peregrine Bookstore. They're available in a couple of other stores. They're available in Kindle on Amazon as well as print. So you can have them that way.
Yeah.
The albums are available on Amazon as well. And so anybody who's interested in exploring that is able to do it that way.
And I'll put up all that information for people so that we can get them pointed to learn more.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Greg, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
When I set out to start the podcast, I was concentrating on business owners because I didn't really know any different. And then as things started to progress and I met people like you, I thought, man, I would love to have you across the table just so you can share your story. So I really do genuinely appreciate it. I really, it means a lot to me, and I know other people are just going to find it interesting as well.
Well, I'm humbled by it. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, I will put all this information down. Be sure to pick up some books, get reading. It's always a good time to read, and it's always a good time to go outside and exercise and just get out.
You bet. Keep your mind active and your body.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all I got.
All right.
Do you have anything else?
No, good talking to you.
You guys, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.